So we know how much fun Frozen Orb is now, right? Well, forget about it because it's dead. Hello, my fellow sorcerers. Let's talk Season 4. And I should say before we get any ridiculously further into it, okay, look, new Frozen Orb isn't exactly dead, but it has been preemptively nerfed based on the PTR, which is certainly big sad times, but we will get to that. First and foremost, we have had now the campfire chat, the big, like, 90-minute long stream showing us everything in detail of how Season 4 is going to be, what shape it's going to take, and what we can expect, and how the PTR changes have, well, been changed since. Of course, it is Loot Reborn, and essentially the fundamental adjustments to the base game is kind of the season theme, with just a little bit of a sprinkling of a reputation-y Iron Wolvesy system, so that's a whole discussion that we will be having soon, but I want to keep this focused. Inherently, well, let's go over what's actually changed for us based on the PTR and the fun new builds we were experimenting with. Red, then, is the changes that have been made since PTR, and, well, Fractured Winterglass, our Frozen Orb Endless Chain with Conjuration machine, has taken quite the hit. The old low end is the new high end, which is a big shame. Before, we could really stack some lucky hit and have it essentially last nearly forever, whereas now the conjuration chance to keep peppering out more orbs, which will then keep peppering out more conjurations, is going to be much less consistent. Now, that said, I understand why this happened, because it was kind of ridiculous, but also kind of ridiculous is the point. It's still not Barbarian level ridiculous, so until we get to that, does it really need to be preemptively hit before we can actually experiment with it fully in the full season? I really do think that until the other 4 classes can be brought up to Barbarian 4-weapon ridiculousness, it's a little bit strange to already knock them on the head. Don't get me wrong, Frozen Orb is still going to be a phenomenal choice, but certainly a little bit less so. And I guess, in essence there, the one advantage is it's now not going to be clearly the best build on balance, and there will be other contenders, which does promote variety, which ultimately leads me to a point I will be talking about in a little bit, which that is Sorcerer is actually looking incredibly fun compared to the other classes from sheer number of viable, actually entertaining builds we'll have access to. This little note here of the Frozen Orbit extra explosions triggering more conjurations was a bug, and that's now finished, is also a shame, as that's 2 extra chances per Frozen Orb gone to summon conjurations to keep casting more Frozen Orbs. So generally, we're just going to see a lot less Frozen Orbs, but with how much we actually cast them personally, it might not feel as severe as it reads, but certainly something to think about. On the other side of things, the other new build-enabling unique in Flameweaver, with the firebolts going through the firewall, has gotten a pretty significant buff. So it now splits into 3 instead of 4, which actually is better mechanically because it will be a tighter spread, which means you don't have to be as up in the face of an enemy to have them all hit if you're DPSing down a boss, and that offers a little bit more flexibility. But beyond even that, they now get 30 to 70% more damage as opposed to 10 to 30%, which is, yeah, a potential of 120 across 4 to 210 across 3. It's kind of made it into a much bigger, condensed firebolt shotgun through firewall. I still think it's a bit clunky to throw down a firewall and then fire firebolts through it, but that said, it is certainly a lot more attractive now, and on a raw power level, it's phenomenal, and it's something I very much can't wait to experiment with. So all in all, not the worst there. We still have two very powerful, very viable new builds, one more so than the other, but less than it was in Frozen Orb, and there's plenty of hybrid builds between a few skills, like weaving Frozen Orb into other builds that I think is actually going to be quite good, and perhaps even best, and basically I have a lot of theory crafting in mind, and I can't wait to share that with you guys, as I always do, coming up with these builds, and making this class that I love the best it can be together with you all really is a joy. Beyond that then, they did mention that while leveling, while doing the season journey, we are now going to get gear, legendaries with aspects that will push us towards a certain build while leveling. For Sorcerer, they labelled Incinerate as our leveling build of choice. Okay, maybe that's not fair per se, because I think there is some potential here, and it's something I'm going to experiment with, as of course we will be releasing our ideal leveling builds for the classes in the coming weeks before the season launches, and with Incinerate, look, it's been buffed a lot, and if you do get the specific aspects, which you're now guaranteed to, you can get quite the clearance speed on weaker tier 2 enemies, which is inherently what they're going for. The mana consumption isn't crazy, and with tempering you can fix mana quite easily now if you get the right manual soon enough, so there is some room here. And I can see a world where you can just walk around on your journey to Nightmare and Torment, just flicking on Incinerate on and off, and it just kind of burn sparks through a room, and everything literally melts, and there is both fun and some power to be looked into there. It might actually end up being quite a transitionally powerful build, but it remains to be seen. It's certainly still a strange choice. I mean, it's not strange. We have a little focus on it because of the new aspect that splits it into 3 beams, and they felt that would be fun. But it is historically the weakest sorcerer skill by a long way, and that's never changed, despite it being one of the more fun ones. So I remain hopeful for it because it is fun, and I want it to be good, but it's going to need a little bit of testing. We might end up very much transitioning very quickly, or never even trying it at all, so watch that space. Past that then, as I said, we do have a lot of potential builds lining up here. We have the old Season 3 new unique in the Meteor Helmet still to be enhanced massively, primarily with the size increasing tempering. In fact, any skill that has a size increase temper on it is going to be worth playing around with, and that's really enjoyable. It's kind of why I almost don't feel the worst that there isn't a seasonal theme that adds power, like your Seneschal, like your Vampire Powers, like your Malignant Heart, because ultimately, you could look at tempering and the effects that it adds across all your gear as a seasonal theme. Like, if they had done tempering as a seasonal theme, it would work and we would accept it. Oh, for a season, we could make meteors drop for 3 times the size. That's crazy. Like, that would kind of feel almost like, oh, okay. But now it's just the base game, so it also feels like, oh, so they just didn't do a seasonal theme? That's okay. It's a bit lame, but alright. But in any case, specifically build-wise, anytime you can manipulate the base mechanical property of a skill, there is potential there for righteously abusing it. And they kinda did realize that because they have put a hard cap of size increasing up to 100%, but don't let that fool you, 100% is still massive. Cooldown reduction also got capped at 75%, at least from gear. We can still get a little bit more from skills, etc., but that's still a hefty amount, and it must be capped there because they have it in mind that we can reach it, and with tempering and masterworking, they might be right. And that's another reason it's going to be very exciting being a sorcerer, because every class loves cooldown reduction, but I don't think any class loves it quite as much as sorcerer, for permanent unstable currents, for teleporting just constantly. We have so much synergy with skill spam in a way that isn't just for direct damage, that this is quite wonderful. If we get some strong cooldown reduction rolls that then get masterworked, they hit that 25% affix increase, and we hit that 75% cooldown cap, you are going to start seeing some absurd results that might actually pull us ahead of, dare I even say it, barbarians. So there is a lot to look at there, and indeed we do have Incinerate size if that ends up playing into the Incinerate push that they're going for, but again, I'm not sure. The point is though, we have ourselves multiple different size increasing temperers, which adds by itself like 6 new builds to fully get invested in, and I personally can't wait on that front. Damage isn't going to be a huge issue. Even at level 200, the pit was kinda fine. New helltide optional difficulty is also going to be kinda fine, and Frozen Orb was absolutely deleting the level 200 super uber bosses from the now triple material summons, and I think many other builds will be able to do the same. I feel like we're almost kinda reaching a really nice place in terms of relative balance for the class and what it can do, especially if we ignore what the other classes are doing around us, but Sorcerer relative to the content in Diablo 4, I think is undoubtedly going to feel incredibly both fun, fast, and most importantly, powerful in this season. I think there's still plenty of synergies and combos that are going to be a little bit nutty cuckoo bananas, and you know I don't say that often, that we really need to keep an eye on. So while I can't say that I was a little bit disappointed there wasn't more class changes revealed, talked about, announced, I am at least a little bit relieved that it's not been too drastic, because what was on the PTR was a really lovely base, and I think the easiest way to say it is that none of the seasons, and indeed the base game 2 before Season 1, will have had more variety for this class than Season 4 will, thanks to this. And perhaps no season after this will either, as in Season 5 we will kind of know what's going on with the tempering, with the builds, how it all works out, what works, what doesn't. They've said they'll add new tempering manuals, which is nice, and then there'll be, you know, whatever Season 5's theme and power mechanic is, but right now is the ripest of times for invention and creativity and actually coming up with ridiculous builds, and that's really exciting to me. So whether the season as a whole ends up being a success, whether the lack of a power theme ends up being a actual big Achilles heel remains to be seen, but I think at the very least, and I realize this is a low bar to clear, I will be invested for much longer and much more intensely than both Season 1 and Season 3, and I would be very surprised if not more than Season 2 as well. I like to have a document where I write down all my theory crafting notes and builds I want to try and synergies I want to explore and everything that I'm planning. It's kind of a problem. There's so many pages, and my pages for Season 4 have grown massively, and checking it against my Season 3 ones, yeah, we're already at double the length, which I think says a lot when it comes right down to it. So more than anything, yeah, I think it's a good time to be almost safely excited. Even just something like staffs, and you might be like, what? Out of nowhere staffs? What do you mean staffs? Because of how tempering works and the size increasing of skills and staffs, two-handed weapons doing a double on your affixes, I think this is going to be the season of staffs for Sorcerer. Yes, the extra attack speed and the affixes on one hand, offhand, one focus, dagger, focus are really good and still certainly juicy, but there is so much value to doubling the power of a temper now that might end up being just the done thing outside of any specific build that needs to be one hand offhand or needs the extra aspect. So I think that's finally going to come into play and will certainly feel a little bit more fair, because let's be honest, staffs have just sort of been ignored, and that's kind of a fundamental change, so yeah, that's nice to see too. And being able to almost guarantee an uber unique at least one means we can now weave that into our builds in a more deliberate way outside of extreme luck. Ooh, I can do this now, and that opens up a lot of possibilities. So all in all, yeah, it is a good time to be a sorcerer. I think we're going to see a lot of starless skies in builds, and I also do think we're going to see a lot of builds that are mainly uniques, which is very interesting considering tempering, considering masterworking, and how that will play out, and, well, I'm very intrigued by it, because we're going to be Talrash's ring, we're probably going to be starless skies ring. If you're frozen orb, then you fractured hourglass for your necklace, you might have a shako on your helmet, you'll probably be running raiment or the other uber unique. Your legs might end up being Tibolts, your boots, Essus, and it's like, oh, okay, we've literally just got gloves and a staff. So I actually think the balance of gear is going to be the most difficult and therefore interesting it's ever been. So yeah, food for thought there, how I'm currently seeing it after this stream, and just wanted to share my thoughts sorcererly. In any case, for now, let me know what you're thinking. Like if you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.